Eton College. Yes, the very posh one indeed. Well, they are about to open 3 new selective so-called free schools in the north. And it got me wondering, Connor, I'll start with you. I'm going to speak to Toby Young on this topic as well. Of course, he is very much involved in free schools and academies and all the rest of it. But do you think that Eton moving up north is going to help kind of close that attainment gap that we're seeing on graphs like that and results days today?
So I think the attainment gap, I would be interested to see a breakdown across ethnicities as well. Higher ethnic minority population in London relative to the north, and we do know that some families, particularly Chinese, Asian and the like, have higher education attainment outcomes because of cultural pressures than specifically white working class boys in this country. They're the second to least in education outcomes, just above Irish travellers. So I would be interested to see that demographic breakdown. But on the broader point, I think state schools are generally failing students, not just because there are fewer than in private schools resources dedicated to each student, but because the curriculum is less specified to their individual strength. They often play to the lowest common denominator in the class to make sure everyone's at a baseline level of passing, but they don't enable excellence. And GCSEs as well, they're really poorly structured. You're covering, I think I had something like 30 exams, and boys specifically are often more specified to one specific domain of intelligence, whereas some of their other subjects suffer. So I think we need earlier specification as well in the education system more broadly.
And Emily, let me bring you in, specifically this Eton thing, because I find that I am Northern, my accent gives it away, and I'm really interested in how you can level up the north-south. I don't think you can, actually. I think that ship has sailed, and I don't really think anyone cares, because I think if they did, they would have done something about it years ago before all the gaps got too big. But notwithstanding that, Eton, to use my TV voice and not my whole voice, the 3 new colleges, do you think that will really make a difference in levelling up?
I don't know whether just 3 of them, because there are also only 6th form colleges. And just to explain to the viewers how it's going to work, is Eton is partnering with an academy, Star Academies, so they're actually going to be called Eton Star Academies. But what I think is a fantastic idea, this, Eton is like a world-famous centre of excellence of learning, but it is only available to those who can afford the fees, although they do a huge amount of bursaries, more than any other private school in the country, and a lot of outreach work. But what this is going to provide up north is all their expertise in how to create, you know, the best learning at 6th form and get those teenagers into Oxford, Cambridge, Manchester, Bristol, maybe outwards towards America, because you can get incredible bursaries in America if you're a sporting figure as well. So to me, this is like, it's brilliant, but there are only 3 of them. It's just a start, but Eton is planning on rolling out more. And I also think that it's great between levelling up between the haves and the have-nots, because there are very few people who can afford the school fees for Eton. It is now sort of over £30,000 a year. That's unattainable except for the very richest in society.
I thought it was a lot more than that. I thought it was about 40 odd.
Well, I haven't checked. It probably, with all the extras, it probably is.
Yeah, and then some, yeah. But look, do you know what? If you are sitting there and you're thinking, because I used to be very anti-private schools, I must confess. When I was growing up, I was always saying I'd never put my kid into private schools, never, 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 never. Now that I'm a mum, I sit there and I think, actually, if I could afford to do that for my child, and I knew that I could afford to do it for the duration, because you don't want to be like that kid out the in-betweeners that went and then came out and got bullied. So if you could afford to do it for the duration, would you put your child into private school? I don't really know why anyone would say no to that. But anyway, joining me down the line, we've got the director of the Free Speech Union and a man that knows a thing or two as well about free schools, Toby Young. Toby, good evening to you. Specifically, when it comes to Eton rolling out 3 new facilities up north, do you think that will have an impact when it comes to educational outcomes?
Well, it's very difficult to say with any degree of certainty, Michelle, what educational policies, what educational measures will have an impact. It's an unbelievably complex area, and the research literature is voluminous, and people disagree on both sides, and they often appear to be equally well informed. Eton has been successful with a similar 6th form in East London called the London Academy of Excellence. It's not the only private school involved in the London Academy of Excellence. There are about 5 or 6 that have collaborated, but it is an extraordinarily successful school. I think it gets more kids into Oxford and Cambridge than many leading private schools. And there's no reason to think Eton can't replicate the success of the London Academy of Excellence in these 3 areas where it's opening these new sixth forms. So I think it will have a positive effect, but I don't think we should exaggerate just how positive the effect will be. It's easier to set up high-performing sixth forms, and one of the reasons they do well is because they're very selective. I've been to the London Academy of Excellence on several occasions. You talk to the kids there, they're incredibly highly motivated. They've often found the school themselves. It's not something their teachers or their parents have steered them towards. They've Googled, best sixth form in East London. They found the London Academy of Excellence. They've applied themselves. So you get those sorts of kids applying to these schools. They're probably going to do well, even if they go to relatively poor performing schools, because they're so well motivated, they're so bright. The real problem is in secondary schools, and I think where we can really make an impact there is to learn the lessons of some of the most successful free schools, like the Michaela Community School in Wembley, which got extraordinary GCSE results today. And one of the reasons that school is so successful, apart from the charisma and leadership of Catherine Burbelsing, the head teacher, is because of the systems they put in place. No tolerance for disruption, silent corridors, no talking out of turn in lessons, extremely high expectations of the kid, of all the kids, no tolerance for any bad behavior or breaking of the rules. All the kids are expected to express their gratitude, their thanks to the teachers for the work they do. Just to go to that school, you think to yourself, well, if this system could be replicated in every secondary school in England, we'd soon have the highest performing education system in the world, better than Singapore.
Indeed, interesting stuff. That's Toby Young there, the Free Speech Union director. He mentions Michaela. Anyone that's on social media, if you know of the headmistress there, the headmaster there, Catherine Burbelsing, the abuse that woman gets, I find it absolutely disgraceful. Anyway, I think she does a great job. But what do you think is motivating Eton to do this? Do you think that they're sitting there from an altruistic perspective going, how do I help these poor Northerners? Or do you think there's something more to it than that?
No, I think they genuinely know they probably can't survive as an institution unless they start helping the less well off, because it will literally become a school that just caters to the super rich. We're talking about super rich Russians, super rich Chinese. It's times have moved on from when, Boris Johnson was there. Then it wasn't even that difficult to get in. It was more where your family stood, who you knew. I mean, he, in fact, got a scholarship there, so didn't pay a lot of the fees. So I also think they're about to, Labour's already said they're going to change the rules so they won't get charitable status. Now, I could be correct in this. I don't think Eton takes charitable status anyway, so it wouldn't be one of the schools. But I think times have moved on, and people want... When you are literally, Eton's one of the most famous education centres in the world. It's got to move with the times, just as Oxford and Cambridge has. But I do think Toby made some very good points. These are highly selective sixth forms. They are great, but they are going to take the best of that area. And I still really believe in that. That is amazing. They're going to be moving kids from these areas into Eton and Cambridge and Oxford and into the top universities where they probably wouldn't have done unless... I know that school in London very well. It is amazing, the one that gets all the children into
she gets
Oxford.
Such a kick in, a headmistress.
Well, she's very outspoken, and as we know in society, a lot of very outspoken women do get attacked.
This is very true.
And she's a woman of colour as well. So I'm afraid I think she knows that comes... I'm not saying it's acceptable, but I think it comes with having a high profile.
I think a lot of parents as well are absolute wet lettuces who can't stand the thought of their children being properly disciplined because they've not managed to discipline their own kids at home. And then when you get them into the school and then they get disciplined in this way, they don't know what to make of it. They can't cope with it. But anyway, I'm a little bit cynical when it comes to private schools because there is, as Emily was just saying then, there's going to be a big conversation that's going to get a lot more kind of focus on it if Labour get in the next election as to whether or not private schools should be granted charitable status, whether or not they should have exemptions, for example, the fees from VAT and all the rest of it. Where do you stand on that, Connor?
I think that it's less so the times are changing and they've got bleeding hearts, and it's more that usually people respond to incentives and not ideas. They are seeing a Labour victory coming down the pike, and they're concerned that if they aren't seen to be engaging in levelling the playing field for as many people across the country as possible, then they'll get the heavy end of the hammer when it comes to legislation. I would say as well, it's less so that I'm sceptical of private schools because I think they have much higher standards. And just for declaration, I went to a state school. It was rubbish, even though it was a grammar school, and they said that they pride themselves on educational attainment. Well, they didn't exactly encourage excellence for most of their students. But I think the standards needs to be raised, and you'd get that a hell of a lot more by making it more market competitive, like the voucher system do in the States.
Well, let me know your thoughts at home.